Hello, my name is Brendan Decora, and I want to welcome you to my podcast, Pro Audio Profiles. Here, I'm going to interview recording engineers, mixers, producers, and others in the pro audio field. Together, we're going to learn how you can make amazing records that can give your listeners goosebumps. Welcome to the show. I'm excited to announce that all episodes moving forward now have video, so check them out on YouTube. On today's show, I'm happy to have my friend Yukon, multi-platinum mastering engineer with credits with YBN Nahmir, Spencer, and Frank Ocean. Enjoy. So it's great to have you on the show. I'm really happy to have you here. I've known you a long time. We've been homies for a long time now. Yeah, over a decade I've known you.
Yeah, you were one of my first real mentors, honestly, in this whole thing.
Oh, shit.
On how to be an assistant.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you're doing mastering now, which is awesome.
It's fun.
Yeah, the main focus of my podcast is how to inspire your artists to, get great recordings and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, it's a little bit different with mastering.
But it's
because it's already kind of done.
Yeah.
But I want to touch on that, obviously you can't inspire the artist to perform at that point, but you can certainly have the finishing touch that is the last piece of the puzzle that makes it incredible. So if there's anything you want to add to that or anything you can focus on with that in mind.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I hadn't thought about it in those terms until just now, but I mean, it's easy to say it all flows downhill, downstream. Like if you get a great recording and a great mix and a great master, it all kind of flows. But the one thing I really do latch onto in mastering is performance. I'm looking for nuance in the performance, especially if something like a vocalist or whatever is going to be the top line front and center. That performance isn't something I can necessarily inspire in the capturing of, but I can very much make or break almost in the way the nuance of that performance is brought out in the master. And it's sometimes really cool and really terrifying how much you can subconsciously make this song better or worse, or accent a good performance or highlight a not so good performance in a way that makes it look or sound amazing. So, although I hadn't really thought about it in terms of inspiring performances, but I always look at mastering like my goal is to make sure that happens throughout every speaker, so.
Right. And I mean, obviously you're not inspiring the performance, but you're inspiring the end product.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're completing the vision. You know what I mean? It's like the last touch. So that's cool.
I always kind of try to approach every master, and I've said this to some people about how I approach the master. In my role, really, is to approach the whole thing like the first fan, and react like a fan would with an educated ear, or like a little bit of a in between role of engineer and producer and artist to just music fan. And sometimes it's as simple as, does this performance make me do this real quick? Or is there something in it, that makes me, and that might be the difference between, I literally had this last night. Like there could be the difference between 150 hertz and 149 hertz, or, and it gets into that subconscious, how's that affecting the overall kind of performance of the song or the production and mix or everything. So, and that can get into mic choice and how far the singer stands from the mic and all those sweet spots, all those infinite little sweet spots that go into the whole thing. So that is something I never really thought too hard about in terms of performance and musical performance, but is the foundation of what I'm listening for when I'm mastering. And if I can latch onto that, then song just masters itself at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is there, so how do you work with artists to understand their vision and ensure that the final master reflects, their final creative vision and intention?
That's that's interesting because I'm not in the room when it's being created, and I almost prefer
Right.
it that way. And I don't want control over any kind of details, really. I want the song to the point where the people responsible for it up to that point are excited about it. So
Right.
that's kind of, everybody's performance needs to be kind of dialed in at that point all the way down. But at a certain point, I'm just looking to make sure that it's... What was that question again? I kind of lost the original question there in my head.
I guess it's how do you work with them to understand their vision and
Right.
ensure that the final
Yeah,
reflects
okay.
that. And obviously,
So since
I'm the
not in
same way
room,
I'm the same way when I'm mixing because a lot of time I'm mixing remotely, and it's the same process. It's like you have to ask a bunch of questions and kind of figure out what their plan is and kind of decipher what the goal is.
Exactly. And I'd be kind of curious of your take on this because I, at that point, really rely on, and it's a little different in mastering because things are considered done at that point mostly. But I try to let the production or the song itself or the record itself, not necessarily just the song, but the whole record itself, tell me what it needs. It sounds kind of dumb,
Right.
but like if the song is pushed and everything's kind of redlined and it's an aggressive song, maybe louder is better and a more aggressive approach to the master might make it work. And so I try to let the performance of the artist or the production really kind of inform how the master comes out. At the
Right.
same time, there's a bit of we got the cat appearance of the first cat.
Sorry,
All right,
there's a kitty in the shot.
it's going to be the star of the show. That's
Her name is
I
Maya.
might get one too, maybe two. Maya, hi Maya, welcome to the show. That's funny. No, it's the kind of thing where if I don't necessarily interpret the record the same way as the production, then that's when maybe revisions come in and we have a conversation about and it's usually minor taste differences or something that they were thinking the whole time that I just never even knew about, or
Of course.
and so at that point, and those are just normal revisions in the process, and I actually enjoy those because they make it better. Usually, they're usually right, and so they're
Right.
hearing something I wasn't listening to. So, and they're not mixed revisions where the whole house of cards can kind of come apart when you're
Yeah.
working, and now it's just like
Exactly.
a whole new thing. Whereas I try not to, unless it's a full-on remix of a song or something. But so it's at that point, it does get into how do I understand what the client or the artist is really thinking and feeling and trying to get, because that's kind of my job. Part of my elevator pitch is to kind of tell people I take an objective approach and an objective listen to the record, and then identify those strengths and intentions of that record, and then kind of make those come to life. So
Right. And
that's performance.
And that really is very similar to when I'm mixing too. It's like, I obviously any mixer, we have to figure out, listen to their ref mix, their version of the song. I get references from them. I ask them like, hey, so this reference is totally different, but if you really like your mix, I'll just use that as kind of a minor guide, where sometimes they're like, oh no, my mix is terrible. Please, like, we want to get it as close to the reference as possible. And so then, it's just about communication. It's figuring out where they're at, how far to take it, and, go from there.
It's true. And I have a lot of respect for mixers. Like, part of the reason I landed in mastering after we were doing studio stuff and recording all the time was I'm not very good at mixing. Like, that's a lot of creative detail that it's a lot. And it's everybody, coming out of the studio life or recording. And I mean, back in the day, I don't know if we're allowed to say where we all work, but it was just like, I remember being kind of in friendly, quiet competition with everybody about like who can be the best mixer, who can get. Meanwhile, you were the only one getting hired to mix us out of the studio, but like the rest of us were like, how do we outmix the guy next to us or whatever. And
Right.
I just remember always sitting there being like, I don't know. I don't know what to do with this. Like, I don't have the musical. I love playing music, but I don't necessarily love writing music.
Right.
And so it's very similar.
Well, it also comes down to, there was times when, even early in my career, I was doing a mix and I would put up, one of my favorite songs by my favorite artist and compare it. And I was like, this mix is terrible. Like, my mix already blows theirs away. But that wasn't the intention. In the end, it's like, well, maybe they wanted that lo-fi distorted sound or whatever. It's all about the artist's vision. And it really does come down to, it's like, with me, it's like, there's not competitors, there's collaborators,
Right.
It's like, we're all doing the same thing. And obviously, even if I had another mixer on here, like, we're two different people. We do things differently.
Providing
It's
your
like,
own
that's also
tastes,
why I actually want to touch into, I know you've been working on this new platform with the template scenario.
Yeah.
And that's a reason why I've always been, just to summarize, you're working on a site where people can buy templates for recording or mastering or mixing or whatever.
Podcasting.
Different, anything. But for me, like, I've always been, as I've always been very forthcoming with my knowledge, with what I know, and even my settings, like whatever. Like, you can take the exact thing that I'm using. I'm happy to give it away because every recording is different. And if you take the same exact thing and put it through there, it's, you're still going to have to use your experience and your knowledge to tweak it a little bit and make it, shine the best you can. So it's like, I've never been holding anything to the chest like that,
Yeah. And I can vouch for that. 'Cause honestly, I learned early on as a runner, and I had a half hour to get the whole session cleaned up and out the door and locked up at the end of the night. Like, I learned if I asked the right questions, certain people, yourself at the front of that, would enjoy talking about audio. Go figure.
Right.
But I'm the same way. Like, I remember getting off of sessions and then now just like going to the next studio to roll cables and kind of hang out and talk audio over there. And like,
exactly.
Just because I kind of weirdly like rolling cables and like talking about
and
audio a lot.
Even if you're doing that, you can still have conversations and learn and, get something out of it for sure. So
yeah. And on the side tangent of the templates, that is kind of the goal. Like, there's a lot of presets out there and there's a lot of, one setting that's going to solve all your problems because some guy in his, space said that it's cool on YouTube or on, sold you a template bundle or a preset bundle of some kind. And none of it really gets down to the foundation of how somebody sets up to creatively work on audio and make art with audio. It's not necessarily one setting. It's a moving set of fundamentals, really. And so, and then applied in a creative way. So, and then everybody does that their own way. Like, that's the part that fascinates me. And we really did get unique perspectives working at, the big LA studios. Was every day was looking over somebody new's shoulder, watching how they would use the same set of variables to create what they were going to create. And there's a handful of people that like took time to learn me something that I knew, like yourself back in the day, but it was a lot of that too that helped me kind of inform how I approach mastering and develop my own little approach to mastering that works for me. So yeah.
And that's also the thing too with the templates. Like, in anything, it's, you use that as an inspiration. It's like you put this template on, you get the sound, and it's like, oh, this is super cool, and that inspires you to move forward and tweak it, and even create new parts and whatever. It's all about inspiring people at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So,
and a lot of the idea came out of, I have a mastering template. I would be lost without templates. And honestly, I remember building templates back at East West. Let's be honest. And like, I would, in the, you know, long lasting effort of trying to be number one, it was always like, well, how do I jump in ahead of me? And
Right.
I just remember, like, I enjoy setting up sessions too, and that's part of that job I miss, is just setting up like drum sets and
Right.
things like that. But I don't get to do that anymore in mastering, or like
Yeah.
roll cables, like, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
But it's yeah, it's that little stuff. But what I was able to really kind of see was all the different ways people would do that, and then how it all kind of like informs what you do later, and how so a lot of what I picked up there was something I took back into how I hear and want to manipulate mastering, but then also with putting that into a workable flow. I can't be starting from scratch every time and just like
Of course.
setting up drums at night
Yeah.
and leaving it for the session in the morning. I would try to put together a template at the studio that made sense for the session, and then that
Of course.
always got added to, but then becomes the template for the whole record, and or whatever the whole project is. And so it's a weird thing to be fascinated by, but like templates are the foundation of what allows me to be creative. And so
Well, yeah. I mean, I use templates all the time too. Like it's it's basically a process for bypassing the menial, boring parts of the job. It's like if you have to start from scratch, it's like, okay, I have to think about the routing and which plugin do I want and how do I set like just the boring aspects. It's not about, oh, this sounds really cool, I'm gonna add this effect and I have this EQ ready so I can do this. It's about skipping the boring parts and jumping right to the creative parts. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
It's
true. And it gives you a solid foundation. Like for me, mastering can be sometimes lost in the weeds, or you're looking for a needle in a haystack of a resonant frequency that's going to, make the whole thing a bummer. And so eliminating the variables, that's why mastering studios are, I was told back in the day that it takes 9 months to dial in a mastering studio perfectly.
Wow.
And after doing it, more probably.
Like having a baby.
And it's because, and because I mean, when you used my room that one time, I remember this because you guys were having like a meeting and hanging out, and it was cool and fine and whatever. But I liked how you guys had positioned a chair, and I remember leaving it. I don't know if you remember me calling you, being like,
Okay.
but it was
right.
There was a chair off to the side of the room behind me that was like kind of positioned in a way that I liked how you guys had left it. It was more like homey and felt like opened up the room. The whole day that day, I was like, what is going on? I don't think he would have like touched a speaker and moved. Something's off in here. And
jeez.
at the end of the day, I literally I was leaving, I had my backpack on, everything, and I like had some music playing, and I like just positioned the chair like 45 degrees back to where it was, and the whole room shifted back into being in phase with itself. I was like, oh my
back
God.
to what you're used to.
Yeah.
You need to have people over more, man.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's really the truth.
Right.
Bona fide studio rat.
Yeah, exactly. So as a mastering engineer, and honestly, for me, it's the same with mixing, but we work with people of varying levels of technical experience and expertise. How do you ensure that they understand the process, that you can provide them with, what they need, and that they can provide the right information? Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah. A lot of, for me, and this is part of the reason I like doing mastering professionally, is it's inherently simpler than mixing for sure, but also inherently simpler than coordinating a recording session and mics and the whole thing. But a lot of that is keeping it simple. And then I was able to, and this kind of goes back to the template conversation, and one of the things the template allowed me to do once I realized I was going to do mastering professionally and try to pay the rent with it, it was, okay, how, the studio needs to make $150 around that, or a day to survive. How does, how do I not eat up half that time recreating the same session? How do I spend that time not chasing song titles through emails and wondering what versions were, so
Right.
I was able to
Skipping
kind of
the boring
standardize the process. Yeah, exactly. And honestly,
Yeah.
I started outsourcing a lot of that filler stuff to my clients. And so there's an intake form that takes literally like 2 minutes to fill out. It's like your name and
Right.
email and song titles, things you would want to write anyways.
All the
And
information
now
you need.
and it's all in one spot. I copy and paste it into the metadata, so I don't have to worry about spelling and any of the things that I had to do back in the days. The mastering assistant that leads to problems down the road and things like that. So
Right.
it actually helps me start to kind of like streamline the whole process of mastering. And then now at that point, the things that I'm having to explain to people are relatively simple because the whole process was more or less laid out as they booked, and then kind of went through the process of getting to know me. So, but this is also like if I did mixing, I don't know if I would be booking everything on a website and having everybody automated into a intake form that has to be filled out, and I track all my projects through, and that's all because of mastering and the nature of mastering, which allows for my interface to be a little simpler. But then again, there's a lot of the dark art of mastering, and so I'll, if it's sometimes something that's not worth getting into, I'll just lean into that and be like, it's a technique trick, and in reality, I just need to like change an EQ point on the sides of a mid-side EQ, and I don't need to get into that with them, but they, I'll just, or I really actually, in the realm of performance, try to keep it in those terms, the specifically vague adjectives and the real, and which is part of the job I really like. I love that specifically weird way of describing what you're hearing without actually knowing how to say. And honestly, I hate when people like 2.5K, there's some kind of, it's like, no, it's not 2.5K. There's some resonant frequency up around. Just because you cut on 2.5K in your studio that day doesn't mean that me cutting 2.5K on this is gonna, let's talk about the quality of it, because that actually helps me a lot more. I've learned to have to like, okay, when they're talking about tuning, they think it might be a little harsh or something like that. And
Right.
so
Absolutely.
But that's the part of this I really actually do enjoy, is kind of like bridging that gap for people. And that's part of what you would do if you're recording somebody. I look at, if we're working on a record together, or performing together at every level. Same if you were in the booth and I was, at the controls or something. It's a performance. It's subtle and it is, but we got to be in the same mindset and the same flow a little bit. So part of the job of mastering is to be into that flow with whatever you hear in the record, and ultimately that's a transfer of the energy of the people that you're hearing, from the music and their music and stuff. So it's all just that being kind of a part of that energy transfer into it coming out of the speakers and making somebody want to dance, at a bar somewhere or something. So
absolutely,
weirdly enough, I had this conversation last night about, most people know audio, like phase and how that kind of works with the sound waves. And, something like a river is a good example of kind of chaos and waveforms and things like that. And you can see in how, rapids are really chaotic, but then something like an aqueduct doesn't have that random placement of rocks and those variables that cause chaos. It's relatively smooth. And so I was like thinking about that, explaining this to a novice or somebody not in audio, and kind of explaining how I think about mastering and having to align that kind of flow of the energy of the sound, and how you drop in little control points with our audio equipment to kind of like align that. And this is the part of mixing that, like, it's easy to do that across a 2-track and have minor little. Once you learn to hear it, like a fraction of a decibel, some resonant harmonic is relatively easy in the grand scheme of audio things to fix. Whereas, aligning all that energy in a way that's musical and creative before mastering is sometimes overwhelming. And so
absolutely,
it's a similar thing. Yeah. So with the Aqueduct, I was thinking of that as a lot more like mixing. And then with mastering, the idea is, okay, I want the water to flow in a specific pattern that is perfect and, is streamlined and glosses over all the inconsistencies of the bed that it's coming down and stuff.
Exactly.
And
cool.
so it's just now dropping little things in. So
exactly.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah. I just want to take a quick break and tell you about my free guide detailing my techniques for recording huge snare sounds. Check it out now at brandondecora.com/huge snare. And now back to the show. So is there any current or recent projects you want to talk about or want to highlight at all that you're allowed to talk about?
I mean, most of the songs I've been mastering are allowed to talk about, but it's honestly, this is the one problem with mastering is I get to work on multiple songs a day. And so I sometimes forget what's going on, or
of course
I don't have my lists in front of me. But the one thing that has been eating up a lot of the focus is that template platform, like you were saying. And so
that's a cool project. Absolutely.
It's an interesting idea. We'll see what happens with it and when, how it's received. But it's to me, I would have killed for something like this coming up where I could get the setup of somebody who works on records that I actually like and isn't up there in some multi-million-dollar studio that I'll never ever own. And I can actually just open on my rig and work on. So that's been an interesting way of kind of exploring everybody's kind of styles and credits and then seeing how to kind of like find everybody's specialization, even though we're all kind of all over the place sometimes with our audio skills. But like, it's really kind of an interesting idea to like look at people who specialize in something and have them think about the problem in a way that's pretty fundamental. And so
and
that's been interesting.
And on top of that, like with engineering, with Pro Tools, with different software, there's always like a dozen ways to do the same thing.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's interesting to see how people do it differently.
Yeah, and that was kind of the original idea was, one, somebody asked me for a Browerized mixing template for Luna because they knew I had a mastering template. And I was like, well, I am not qualified to make that, like, or even speak to any sort of mixing template. Like, last time I did a professional mix was like 5 years ago at least. And so it's why would I ever consider making a mixing template? But I know people who are good at making mixing templates. So,
and honestly,
that's been interesting.
With me and my mixing templates, like, honestly, it's not like I have certain things that I always pump through, like, it's honestly came out of convenience more than anything else. Like I'll have, I add like this one particular reverb I always grab and always pull up. It's like, okay, I'm just going to make a template with that reverb in it. And then, there's this other effect that I'm always grabbing. So, okay. And then that just kept adding up. And now I have like a huge stack of all these effects and I only ever use a small handful of them for each mix. But having everything available is like, okay, now I can move quickly, stay in the zones, stay creative. Not to just sit there and do the boring work, and it makes it easy, But I would never use all of those things in one mix, never.
No, but you have them. The vocal production template that my guy Ryan Hayes and I are working on right now. It has 9 background stack groups. Like, okay. So, I mean, they're just groups of 3 or 5 tracks or whatever for stacks. Right. But he came up at Red One where they do a ton of pop vocal production, like writing and stuff. So it's all just, rapid fire vocals. And I was just like, I don't know if we need 9 stacks of,
Right.
5 tracks each for stacks. And he's like, yeah, we don't until you need them. And I was like, all right, let's just make them inactive. So the session loads up
Exactly.
fast. And
Yep.
now we have 9, because it's true. And that's the kind of thing, like, that's the signature of how he works. And so he's not having to like duplicate any tracks and rename them on the fly. He's not
Right.
doing anything. All he has to do is
It
just
keeps you
make a few
moving quickly
tracks
and staying
active.
creative. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's ultimately, I mean, in my little video that comes with my mastering template, I literally say, like, I'd be lost without my template. It's not that I couldn't master, and actually building templates for different plugin bundles and things that, spread the whole idea out into the standard equipment, like, that made me really test whether I actually know what I'm doing or I just follow my template that worked that one time. And it was because I had to rethink through my process in plugins that I don't use every day, but
Right.
could sub in at any time. And
That's
so-
actually a good point, because there has been a couple times when I'm like on a session or somewhere where I don't have access to my template, and
Yeah.
it's like, okay,
It's a
we
little
want you
scary.
to do this other thing that I wasn't prepared for, and I'm like, okay, wait, what was I doing again? What's my
Yeah.
template?
Yeah.
Like I have to like dig through and remember, and wait, why did I do it this way? And oh yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But then it's interesting because then by doing that, sometimes you learn different ways of doing it,
Yeah.
and different routes to
Yeah,
get there.
something messes up.
So
Well, and a lot of
That's
the
interesting.
idea with this came out into, I have, like you said earlier, like little tricks in my workflow that I have adopted over, years of Glenwood and East West and the like, and random studios and random sessions and the whole, not knowing who's going to show up today, but we're supposed to be doing like a professional recording, not just like a recording studio, but like an
Right.
A-lister recording studio or like session. So, with a writer, but you still don't know who actually is going to like walk in the door and stand in front of the microphone.
exactly.
And honestly, that's why there's so much nerves involved in that. I'm mastering. I need mastering. It's
Yeah.
gonna be perfect.
Oh, good.
But that I developed so many little just personal tricks that and the thing coming to the top of my head is now when I make markers in Pro Tools, if it's marker 1, I type 01 and then whatever I'm going to call it. So the name of the marker says 01 or 02. So I don't have, like, if I'm in a rush and somebody's hit me in the back of the head saying, hey, can we go to the bridge? I don't have to go, oh, which one was the bridge, or what did I make, out of
Right.
order or whatever. I can literally just
Yeah,
be
exactly.
like 06 bridge. Okay, period. 06
Exactly.
period. Move on. And,
Awesome.
and that's, I don't know, it takes a little, I think I honestly started doing that at East West, and it kind of is the type of thing that just led to me not having to worry about whether I was going to like remember the marker numbers later and things.
Right.
And now I don't have to look it up. And now this is something I just do. And now all my templates have a 1 top at, 10 seconds and whatever it is. And that's just how I work. And that's how I can provide a consistent master quality across the whole chaos of this whole
Right.
game that we play. So that's why I would be lost without my template, in the sense of, not having a foundation to cling to when I start a new project. And then
Yeah.
that lets me make every master I work on musical, and I'm focused on, and down to, being able to start in the same way every time. I never do the same thing on every song.
Of course.
And honestly, I never even try to even copy chains to new songs. I'd rather start fresh, because changing
Just
existing
every
settings.
song's different,
Yeah. They're their own performance, actually, going, back to the whole
Right.
top to bottom thing. Is each song is its own performance, and my masters have to be a performance on top of that, because that's my
Right.
creative thing. And so, and then part of the trouble of mastering is actually when you're not feeling all that creative or sensitive or musical. There's a lot of days that I have to like sit down and go through the reference tracks, and that's why I have a whole YouTube video on series on reference tracks, because there'll be days when I'm not hearing the nuances of the performance, like just because I got my own crap going on. And so being able to have songs that in the future or in the past have pulled me out of that kind of chaos and caught my ear and be like, oh, that was something that was just musical. Like, wasn't a genre that, it was just musical. So let me put that on a list that I can get back to when I need that shot of musical.
For sure.
So that's,
cool, man.
That's one of the hard things. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been doing it where, every guest get the same couple of questions at the end, and, just to keep it consistent. So the first one is, what is your most influential teacher?
Interesting. This is going to sound kind of weird, but I've always said I don't really have one mentor because of the way or one teacher, because I went to undergrad for music and, recording arts, and the conservatory for recording because I didn't feel like I knew anything, and ended up at Glenwood and East West and back at Glenwood and scoring stages and mastering houses and stuff. So it's been a little bit of everything, grabbing a little bit of everything from everybody, which I'm super thankful for. But I will say, you kind of taking an interest in talking about audio when I was a runner at East West was something that got me over the hump of professional audio, like pro studio confidence,
The hump of being a runner.
Yeah. Well, and weirdly enough, funny enough, I got referred after being a runner at Glenwood. I got referred over to East West, and I was, of course, trying to move in as an assistant type thing and make that jump without ever having really assisted before. And I had a good recommendation from a client who was the one who was like, you got to go talk to East West. And then when I talked to East West, they were like, oh, by the way, this dude, Brendan, you might know him. He worked at this other studio. And I was like, yeah, I know this guy. I didn't know he was working here. So I just kind of followed you around town for a while there. Yeah. But no, it was, but in East West was good because it was nice to have somebody like you ahead, because that was a little bit more freeform in terms of how you get ahead. And it was nice to have people who would let me and trust me to set up their session, like skeleton, at least like outline and plug the mics in the night before, because that gave me the freedom to really make mistakes. And it was a handful of you guys who were ahead of me that gave me the chance to like plug them all in wrong in the middle of the night and not have anybody see it, and like things like that. That never happened.
Right. But of course not. Of course not.
But, no, never happened. Never once. So that kind of thing. I will credit a guy named Gary Lux. I don't know if you know Gary Lux. He was kind of the very first internship I had in town when I was like, still thought I wanted to do sound effects and be a sound designer for movies. And he is a old school, really quality, nice guy, mixer. Nice. Really kind of
honestly, that was actually one of my other guests is a good friend of his, and I might even try and get him on the show. So.
You should. Yeah.
Cool.
He's very knowledgeable. He's been around at all. He did live sound. I'm pretty sure he mixed like, it was either like Tina Turner or Whitney Houston or somebody at the Super Bowl kind of thing. One of those iconic shows. And and he did a lot of 5.1 music mixing back in the day. He was when concert DVDs were a big deal. He's actually doing a lot of Atmos now. Yeah, I believe that.
Up this game to Atmos,
yeah. And he's somebody I would trust with Atmos for sure. And he's also just really a nice guy who likes to talk about audio and recognizes that some people like to talk about audio and they'll listen if you talk about audio.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So between you two and just doing anything and everything in audio for like 15 years has been the three biggest teachers.
It's always hard to pinpoint it, Honestly, I don't know how I would answer that question. I've been thinking about that myself, and I don't even there's a short list, but I definitely couldn't pin it on one person.
I mean, I'll tell you, I'll leave you with this one. This is the moment I realized I might like mastering and, God forbid, might be good at mastering, was working with Low Leaf at East West in Studio One. She was receptionist at the time, and she was sitting at the desk on her laptop trying to mix her record, and I'm like, there's a ton of audio stuff around here. And she was just like, oh, well, I don't know. And I was like, let's go in after everybody leaves tonight and at least just run your mixes through, Studio One's Neve. Come on.
It's right there.
And, yeah, right. And she was like, oh, I don't know. And I convinced her we should just go try it. And then I asked her, kind of, what are you hearing that's a problem, in these mixes, and we didn't do break it out. We just did stereo mixes through 2 channels on the console. She said something along the lines of the vocals, the background vocals are a little overwhelming or something like that. And I've been chasing that kind of thing. And I was like, cool. And I don't think I even consciously had a educated thought about it, but I plugged in the Massive Passive, the Manly, and there's a real one right there, with a whole bunch of other cool stuff. And plug that in. And I remember it was literally, they have a setting, it's 2.5 or 2.6 kilohertz. And I think I just went there and notched out half a dB or whatever one notch on the Manly is. And the whole thing literally opened up. It sounded
nice,
big. I cut tiny little frequency by half a dB, and
that's awesome.
The record sounded done. It was done, and it was big. It was huge. It was everything it wasn't before that. And she gave me a hug, and we all celebrated. And I remember she's giving me that hug. I remember I've been here for 9 hours setting up for tomorrow's session. And no one's ever greeted me or thanked me like that, or
right.
cared that I saved their record. And all I did was this little click, and that was that. And so I was like, "Is this mastering?" And so, no, that's not mastering, but it's pretty close. And it's
But you knew
I've spent 2 hours looking for that one move before. Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it was all, and it really kind of clicked that oh. In this space, I can literally do something this minute and really make such almost a profound impact on the record.
Absolutely.
That fascinates me. That's just that one master stroke to make the whole thing done. That fascinates me. Because
definitely.
Yeah, that's where the goosebumps live. So it's
Absolutely.
And then getting that to hit for the audience is really where the clients and
awesome
the art.
All right, so next question.
Yeah.
This one, I know this one's going to be a tough one for you, particularly because of the mastering. But what is your favorite reference track? And obviously, I know it varies song per song and everything else. Clients send references, but if you were to go into a room you've never worked in before and learn the room and figure out what the speakers are doing, what's your go-to?
Oh, shit. Well, first off, I'm going to shamelessly plug my YouTube series where I break down all my reference tracks.
Okay, valid.
It's literally called Mastering Engineer Breaks Down Reference Tracks.
Okay.
But that came out of relying on reference tracks, and I was saying earlier, needing certain songs for even just 30 seconds in the end of the song that really popped for me at one point. I recently, it depends on what I'm looking for. I have one that I use for an all-around check. Like I used it to tune the studio. I used it to fine tune the studio. I guess I have 3 songs. One that's like an old school check is basically either Get Lucky by Daft Punk or what's the first song on that record? Bring Life Back to Music, I think it's called.
Okay.
First song on that, Random Access Memories. Both those songs, incredible. The whole record's incredible. Sounds great. But as I've kind of grown, I've found that it suffers from problems that came from that era of production in terms of trying to analog hybrid or digital analog and the whole thing. And if you look at it on it's like a brick wall, and it doesn't sound like it until you realize it sounds like a brick wall.
Right.
So I've moved on to and I use this one. I did a whole demo series on the Odyssey's headphones a while back, and I went down and listened to them, and I ended up listening to one song the whole time, and it's called Hometown Girl, and it's by an artist named Zoo, who's an EDM artist, ZHU. And it just slaps. It's like one of those huge grooves, real clear, dancey kind of songs, so it's real easy to latch onto the groove and stuff like that. And then if I need to kind of check the musicality and really just like detach and make sure I'm feeling the music, there's one specific performance by Dave Matthews Band, and you know me, I'm a huge Dave Matthews Band fan. Yeah, I might have gone to a show or two once or twice.
We have, yes.
But it's a version of the Dreaming Tree, and it's on their 2008 live tracks recordings or something. And that one just it's one of those ones that like caught me and made me take the band seriously back when I was kind of going through that discovery, and then is just epic song, epic horn solos, epic performance.
That's actually really interesting. I've never heard anyone talk about a reference track like that that's just for the emotional aspect. That's
if I can
really
get
cool
lost and feel
concept.
like it's not the best sounding, it comes from alive.
Yeah.
It's I remember at East West, honestly, I was trying to use it to like test the ATCs, and I was like, I don't know if this sounds very good. But I'm like lost in the music, and so every time. So I had to use that recently because getting off a cold, I was not feeling the music. I was having a hard time getting masters right, and I was like,
that's awesome.
Stopped and played the bass, and stopped and listened to a few live performances from the Dave Matthews.
Right. Nice. That's cool.
Yeah. Whatever works.
Yeah, exactly. That's cool. Okay, so last question. Granted, it might be a little bit tweaked for your mastering scenario, but what would be one tidbit you have for an upcoming engineer? And it could be an upcoming mastering engineer in your case, whatever makes sense for you.
Oh man, I remember the go-to answer back in the day when we were all hot shots at the studios was telling people, "Oh, you want to get into this? Don't." And do yourself a favor and just don't.
That's awesome.
If that response makes you mad or your instinct is not fuck that, you're in the right spot.
You're in the right place.
Because that was my instinct. Yeah, I'm pretty sure your response to that would be like, no.
Nice.
But no,
that's
for
really
real,
true. Honestly,
it is.
True.
It's one of the realest pieces of advice I've heard, and that's why I laugh.
It's a hard industry, and if you're in it for the wrong reasons, then it's not going to work.
If you don't love that 5 seconds of freedom you get in between the speakers, in between all this crap, like you're definitely in the wrong spot.
Right.
Especially because this is how I knew, like, place like East West is easy to do this at, but I would get off of sessions and not want to leave. And it was one of the hard parts of not being a runner anymore was my session ends and I'm supposed to go home because I got to be back in like 3 hours. But like the empty building is still here, and like, and I'm not closing it up anymore, and that was a weird thing to get used to, because I liked the freedom of that that kind of learning. I learned a lot in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
But also, but it's really, honestly, to me, it's about maintaining the inspiration. And that's truly why I'm lucky I get to do mastering, is because it's all about delivering that inspiration to the artist or the client or the producers or the team or whatever. And so, and you're really finishing something. I tell people it's a weird thing to be passionate about, but finishing records is kind of like my art.
Right.
And I suck at writing music. I haven't played seriously since college. Like it's a weird thing. And one of the hardest parts is finding that in yourself, to be able to like not get in the way of whatever the record's doing, and then also be sensitive enough to hear, a tenth of a decibel change and, the low end on a track that's all high end or whatever. And so,
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So that's the part of it. So honestly, and the other part of the three best things I've really been told in terms of like studio advice was, Tommy Vicari basically said to go talk to somebody about this, whether or not, see, and then the added on in the conversation was, maybe if you're thinking about being an engineer, getting into the studio life, is maybe booking a session first, but could just be even a small one, and seeing if this is a lifestyle you want to deal with. I kind of wish somebody had told me that, because I remember being in a session when I finally met or got to be an assistant at the big leagues and being like, this is kind of boring. Like, this is cool and all, but I'm set up, and now I just have a week of just sitting in this room and not really being a part of the team, but being on the team. Like, it was I kind of wish I had seen that ahead of time before I went through the whole trouble of it. But that was just that one little scenario. And so it was an interesting idea when I heard that, like, check it out ahead of time and see if it's something you like. It's very glamorous on the outside. No, I never thought to do that.
Yeah.
It's very glamorous on the outside. And when you're interning, you're like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to want. So I'm, here to,
right.
I don't like it, but I'm here. And, whereas if you kind of choose to be there and take a look at it that way, and I thought that was an interesting point of view. And then really the realest piece of advice I think I could give is just stick with it. Like, if you do it because you enjoy manipulating sound and creating something with that, like, you'll always be all right. Like,
exactly.
It's cool. Just sticking. A lot of people get discouraged really easily.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Absolutely. No, that's awesome. That's great information.
Yeah. So
cool,
don't do this.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, sweet, man. Thank you so much for being here. Absolutely. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see you next time.
Might get a cat here in a second. Yeah, we'll get out of here before the cats come.
All right, sweet, man. Right, thanks, dude.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to the show. As you know, I'm just getting this started, and I'd love your feedback on how I'm doing, if I should keep this going, what your thoughts are. Feel free to visit proaudioprofiles.com and send me a message. Until next time.